Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're going to take a look at the Rocky Mountain Radar Odin. This is Rocky Mountain Radar's latest and greatest radar detector. Now, for those of you guys who aren't yet familiar with Rocky Mountain Radar and you're considering buying the Odin, definitely watch this whole video first and consider this video to be a bit of a public service announcement. For those of you guys who are familiar with their products, well, this should be entertaining. So the Rocky Mountain Radar Odin, it retails for $399, $400. And the Odin is the successor to the Rocky Mountain Radar Judge 2.0. It's got the same platform under the hood, so the same performance and most of the same features, but there are a few changes. You'll see things like the case itself, it's now kind of gray instead of black. Additionally, the power cable on the side of the detector, instead of a barrel connector, you've got a new USB Type-C connector. But the main change is the fact that there's now Bluetooth built into the Odin and an app that's available, so we're definitely going to take a look at that. And so for this video, it's going to be kind of in two parts. First, we're going to be taking a look at some test results, everything from performance and scrambling capabilities and Spectre Immunity, and basically we're going to be testing the radar detector and a lot of the marketing claims. And then because the new feature here with the Odin is the Bluetooth capability, we're definitely going to spend some time taking a look at the app. Now, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with Rocky Mountain Radar, they're pretty much the biggest scammers in the industry. One of their big claim to fame is they advertise radar detectors with a scrambling capability, which is supposed to be able to prevent police radar guns and laser guns from acquiring your speed by scrambling the radar guns and the laser guns. And so when you look on their site, you'll see it advertised as both a radar detector and a scrambler. And as they explain on their website, their radar and laser scrambling feature is supposed to make it impossible for a speed detection device to get an accurate reading and measure your speed. And for that reason, let's go ahead and start by testing out the scrambling capabilities. So starting off with radar scrambling, I tested it against 9 different radar guns, including 7 police radar guns and 2 consumer-grade radar guns. And I found that the scrambling capabilities did absolutely nothing against any of the radar guns to prevent them from getting your speed. I've got an entire video dedicated to this, as well as to a lot of the other testing that I do here in this video, but fundamentally, I tested it against a bunch of different radar guns, both from the front and from the rear, and all of the radar guns operated completely normally. The Odin had 0 impact to any of the radar guns. Next, I've done some testing with laser scrambling, basically trying to prevent police laser guns from registering your speed. I tested it with 3 different police laser guns, and again, whole video is linked in the video description with all the test results, but the Odin was unable to prevent any of the guns from being able to register your speed. And so if an officer is targeting you with a laser gun, the Odin is not going to do anything at all when it comes to preventing him from getting your speed, even with the scrambling feature turned on in the detector. Next, what about testing pop radar? Now, pop is kind of irrelevant in practice. It's like a really fast burst of radar designed to let officers preview the speed of moving vehicles, ideally without alerting any radar detector users. There's a lot of issues actually using pop in practice, and so it's not really something you need to be worried about in reality. But Rocky Mountain Radar claims that their detector is going to give you 100% detection of pop radar. Well, I tested it with 2 different radar guns that have pop capability, and it wasn't able to alert to either of the guns. And so it wasn't 100% detection, it was 0% detection. What about just traditional radar? Nothing crazy or fancy or special, just an officer's up the road, a mile, 2 miles, whatever up the road, using radar. How much advanced warning are you going to get compared to other detectors? Well, we can take a look at the Judge 2.0. Rocky Mountain Radar has confirmed that it offers the exact same performance as the Odin, and we've done some testing here with the Judge 2.0. Now, I've sent my Judge over to Variable Wave on RDF, and he's done a bunch of testing that I can go ahead and share with you. So starting off with Ka band, on 33.8, the Judge turned in bottom of the barrel detections for both front and rear detection. On 34.7, which is probably the most common frequency range on Ka band, the Judge came in last place. On 35.5, it had the worst front detections and almost no detection from behind. Moving on to K-band, again, it had the worst front detections and almost no rear detection. Then moving on to X-band, it had the worst front detections and no rear detection at all. Now, Rocky Mountain Radar claims that they've actually removed X-band detection from the Judge, but it actually still alerts. You can still detect it. Similarly, they advertise the same thing here on the Odin, but you still have the ability to turn X-band on and off. Regardless, when it comes to performance with the detector, It performs kind of like $100 radar detector. It performs like a low-end radar detector. Definitely not something you would expect when looking at kind of, other $400-ish radar detectors. Next, the Odin is also notably missing a GPS chip, which is really useful for dealing with false alerts around town from shopping center door openers or speed signs on the side of the road. And without a GPS chip built in, you're not going to get things like your low-speed muting, or your GPS lockouts, or your red light camera or speed camera alerts that you'll typically see from detectors in this price range, such as the Escort Max 3 or the Redenso DS1. In fact, a lot of times you'll also see GPS even built into cheaper detectors like the Uniden R3, the Redenso XP, the Whistler CR97, etc. The Odin, on the other hand, doesn't have GPS. It's actually a pretty simple and basic detector. Now, what about false alert filtering in general? Let's first start with K-band. So what I've noticed driving around town, it's actually quieter than I was expecting, despite the fact of, it doesn't have GPS built in. And I think a lot of that actually has to do with the fact that the sensitivity of the detector is not really all that good in the first place. Additionally, the detector can also switch between highway mode for full sensitivity and city mode for further reduced sensitivity. I've done some testing with a shopping center door opener, for example, and I found that the door opener would alert when the detector was set to highway mode, but then when I switched the Odin to city mode to reduce the sensitivity, it was no longer able to alert to the door opener that was right in front of it. But then when I switched the detector back to highway mode, it raised the sensitivity, and so the detector resumed alerting normally again. And so fundamentally what I think is going on is the fact that you've got a detector that really doesn't have great sensitivity in the first place, and then you have the ability to reduce that sensitivity even more. And so then you're just driving around with a detector like this, and you're like, wow, my detector is not alerting to anything at all. And you're like, yeah, I wonder why. Now, when it comes to BSM filtering, it's going to fall to a lot of the usual suspects like your Mazda CX-5s, for example, as well as your GMs, etc. Now, when it comes to false alerts, the biggest issue that I've seen is not so much the K-band stuff, but really the KA-band alerts. I actually get quite a few just random KA blips while driving around town. Now, something I've noticed is that the Odin will actually alert to a number of different cars nearby with blind spot radar. Instead of as K-band, it'll actually misreport it as KA-band. I've seen this happen multiple times with Honda CR-Vs nearby. Hondas will typically trigger K-band falses, but on the Odin, it will alert as KA-band. I've also seen this happen following Jeeps as well, and so instead of triggering as K-band, it will misreport as KA-band. It's not just blind spot falses, though. I've also seen some speed signs to where the detector will first initially alert as KA-band, but then it will switch back and revert to alerting correctly as K-band instead. I've also seen multiple shopping center door openers that will sometimes alert as K-band, but then other times they will alert as KA-band. And this band confusion, where it's misreporting bands, kind of reminds me of some of the things I've seen from some of the Whistlers or the Escort Solo S4. And then there's also some other KA alerts where I honestly have no idea why the detector is alerting at all. And this is something that I really don't like. You see, KA alerts I take very seriously. Those are very high priority alerts for me. K-band is pretty likely that it's a false alert. But if it's alerting a K-band signal as if it's KA-band, that's definitely an issue. And so I get quite a few KA falses here with the Odin, which is honestly not something I was expecting, but it is definitely something that I've been experiencing. Next, what about Spectre Immunity? Well, they claim that the Odin is totally undetectable by radar detector detectors. And in fact, they explicitly say that it's 100% undetectable by the Spectre 3. Well, when I tested with my Spectre 3, I actually found that the Odin is very detectable in practice. In fact, I could pick it up around 900 feet away. Some detectors may give you a little blip or maybe a weak alert as you get close, but the Odin is highly detectable. It's actually one of the most detectable detectors I've ever tested. And so it's going to be very easy for an officer running a Spectre to pick up a driver who's running an Odin. Next, I want to take a closer look at actually the USB Type-C power port that's here on the side of the detector. Now, with the Odin, this is actually the very first detector that's actually introduced a USB Type-C port on their radar detector. Redenso has since released the DS1, which also offers USB Type-C for power, but technically Rocky Mountain Radar did it first, and so you gotta give credit where credit is due. Now, the power cable for the Odin is also pretty simple. It's basically just two USB Type-A power ports like this into a cigarette lighter plug, and then cable plugs in here, and the other one, USB Type-C, plugs into the side of the detector. And then there's a second port right here so that you can plug in your phone if you're running the app or Google Maps or whatever else. And so it's a pretty simple power cable. There's no remote mute button, no remote alert LED or anything like that. It's just a power-only power cable. And speaking of which, the USB port on the side of the Odin is also strictly for power. This is not for firmware updates. There's no firmware updates available for the detector, and because there's no GPS built in, there's no updates available for the GPS database. Again, the way you'll see with other detectors. And so this USB port, where is it? Right there. It's not for data communication. It's strictly for power. Next, let's go ahead and take a closer look here at the app available with the Odin. This is the main new addition available with this detector, added on from previous generation detectors. So let's go ahead and spend a little bit of time taking a look at the app, different features, and what it's like overall. So starting off, the app itself is fairly simple and straightforward. The main benefit that I found of it is just that it makes it easier. Go up here into the menu, just to go in and adjust different settings instead of actually having to go into the detector. You can turn different bands on and off like this. So boom. Boom. So it can make it easier just to adjust different settings on the detector. You can turn the scrambling on and off like that. You'll also notice this light right here will turn off, and then it turns back on. This right here, you've got a couple shortcuts to some of the main features in the detector. We'll go back to the home screen. So this top one here is just to allow you to adjust the display brightness like this. So you can see we've got the scanning bar. We can do normal brightness. We've got muting controls right here. This button is going to switch between highway mode, which it's in now, to city mode, switch back and forth, and then this bottom one allows us to quickly turn the scrambling on and off as desired. And then as far as the main screen, you can see, boom, right here, we've got a big speedometer, so it'll also give you the speed while you're driving. I do notice that this works better on Android, and the reason I say that is on iOS, there's times where the speed will actually lock up and stop updating properly, and it doesn't seem to affect other GPS apps. It's just the Odin app specifically. In the background of the app, you can see kind of a map of your location, but it's pretty faded. You can't really see it that easily while driving, but it is there. And then as far as an alert display, it technically is an alert display, but it doesn't really present any useful information other than just telling you what band the signal is. So you'll see when we get a K-band alert, this K-band icon right there will light up, and that's all the information you get. We'll go ahead and trigger KA real quick. And again, you'll see the same thing. So it says KA band. There's no signal strength information on the phone. There's no frequency information. It just lights this up whenever you get an alert. That's it. Now, there is GPS built into the app, but it's not going to add any sort of GPS functionality to your radar detector, the way you'll see with some competitive apps. So you're not going to get things like GPS-based low-speed muting using your phone's GPS. There's no GPS lockouts that you can add. There's no pre-built database of red light cameras either. You do, though, have the ability to manually create red light cameras if you want. There's two buttons up here on the top of the screen you can see. The first one is for a red light camera alert. So if we want to go ahead and mark a camera as a red light camera, we can do that here. Though in my testing, when I've tried it, I can create the red light camera alerts, but then I don't get notified of a red light camera next time I come by. So I'm not entirely sure what that feature is for. Personally, I would rather just run something like Waze or Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever that already has a database accurately loaded in and created for me, so I don't have to manually create my own red light cameras, but we do have the feature built into the app. Similarly, you also have the ability to manually report speed traps with this second icon. So if we tap that, you can manually report speed traps. But again, I've run into similar issues with not getting any of the alerts. In fact, of all the time that I spent driving around and testing this, I haven't gotten a single alert from the app. And I was kind of confused. I wasn't actually sure if the feature worked at all. And so besides testing kind of the manual reports like that, I also tried testing out the cloud alerts to see how that works. And so I would drive down the road and I would occasionally trigger the detector to KA band, for example. But then when I drove down that road, maybe 20 minutes later, I didn't get any notification that there was KA band being used in this area. That said, the next day when I went to go drive down that road, I did see little dots showing up on the map for all the locations where the detector previously alerted to KA band. So it does look like there is some sort of automatic cloud reporting capabilities. But again, even with those dots in the map, I didn't get any sort of alerts in the app or in the detector itself, whether it's visual alerts or audible alerts. And just to double check, I even went into the app here. There's an option for reported threats. You can go in there, and I just made sure that I did have it set up to notify me and notify me in the app. And I had the time frame set up to where it should alert me of those alerts. Nevertheless, I didn't get any sort of audible or visual notification while driving that radar was being used in the area. Additionally, those alerts, by the time I got alerted the next day, that's kind of outdated information, to be honest. Like, I want to know if an officer was here 5 minutes ago and somebody just saw radar, that's what I want to know about, kind of real-time alerts, right? After 30 minutes or an hour and a half, the officer's probably going to move on, and those alerts are kind of stale. And I thought it was pretty interesting. If you look here in the app, it doesn't have the ability to filter out alerts that are like, say, an hour old. The minimum filter time is 1 day. I mean, I could set it to alert me alerts that are 3 days old or a week old or a month old, or just see all the alerts ever in the history of the app. But again, I'm not looking for historical information in the past. I'm looking for like real-time cloud alerts, and that doesn't seem to be the way this app is designed to function. Additionally, I'm presuming due to just the sheer lack of users in the first place, I haven't seen any alerts driving around, whether it's manually reported alerts or automatically reported alerts in all the time that I've been testing this app and this detector. Something like Escort Live is going to work way better for all the flack that Escort Live gets, but honestly, something like Waze is going to be way better than something like this. Additionally, the app does not offer any sort of a firmware update capability the way you'll see with other apps from like Valentine or Escort or Redenso, for example. Really, the main benefit that I found is just making it easier to go in and change settings and get your detector set up. I haven't really found any benefit to using the app while I'm actually driving. Additionally, I've also seen some connectivity issues with the detector. I'll go ahead and boot it back up here so that you can see what I mean. We'll just power cycle the detector. So I'll turn it off and turn it back on. And while the detector is booting back up, you'll see it's going to start going through this just little process of showing you what settings are turned on. What I've noticed is sometimes it'll automatically reconnect to the app, but a lot of times next time I get back into the car, it doesn't automatically reconnect to the app itself. This time it did, luckily, so you can see the Bluetooth icon right here. But again, the majority of the time when I get back in the car and I start driving again, it doesn't reconnect to the app. And so for that reason, what I would have to do is go back into the app here. I would go into Bluetooth connection like this. I would have it scan for the device, take a few seconds. Eventually it would find the detector. And then I would just tap right here and say, you found the detector, go ahead and connect to it. It's connected right now, but typically what I would have to do is actually go and manually recreate the connection when I get back in the car. And that gets really annoying, especially considering there's not really any useful functionality in the app to use while you're driving in the first place. And so I've been doing some testing with it, but I haven't actually found it to be useful in practice. I would love to see some of the typical things like a pre-built GPS database or cloud alerts that worked properly, or even manual alerts that worked at all, or firmware update compatibility, or a better alert display that gives you some additional signal information, but there's not really anything all that useful that's available in the app. The main benefit of it is just to make it a little bit easier to change settings. But again, there's not a ton of settings in the app either. You can just kind of go in and do it directly through the detector. And so I was hoping this would be like a really cool new addition to the detector, but it doesn't really offer that much. It doesn't do that much. It's not really implemented all that well. It kind of reminds me of the detector itself, which is just, it doesn't do much. It's not that great. And so fundamentally, we're looking at a detector here that relies on low-end hardware, which is why we see such poor performance. There's no GPS built in. There's no stealth capabilities, despite the marketing claims. It does have Bluetooth built in, but it's pretty limited. It's poorly implemented, and you're lacking a lot of the Bluetooth features that you'll see from a lot of the other competitive detectors. The main reason that you would buy a Rocky Mountain Radar detector in the first place is for the scrambling capabilities, but that doesn't work at all. Rocky Mountain Radar is basically trying to scam users with lies and manipulative, nonsensical technobabble on their website to convince you the detector is amazing when really it's just a really basic, simple, low-grade, cheapy detector. That's what it is. Now, if this detector worked, well, I wouldn't need shelves of radar detectors behind me to test and compare and figure out which one is the best. I would just buy one and it could scramble. Done. Call it a day. Same thing with laser jamming. Like, I wouldn't need thousands of dollars worth of laser jamming equipment and professional installation to put all that stuff in my grill when I could just toss this on the windshield, plug it in, done. Now I've got laser scrambling as well. Like, if this thing worked, that would be amazing. I would run it myself. I would save the time and the money, and other enthusiasts with radar detectors radar guns, laser guns, we would test it and be like, man, this is amazing. This is awesome. I'll just buy this. Done, I mean, if it worked, great, but it doesn't. Just common sense, I guess, to some extent, right? Like, it'd be great if it worked. It doesn't. Is this a good investment? No. Would I recommend it? Not at all. No. I mean, low-end hardware, they're lying as a way to try to get you to buy their products because they're relying on low-end hardware. I was actually hoping that when I tested the app, maybe the app is something new and special. This is like new for the Odin. Maybe this is cool, but it seems like it's the same exact thing as what we've seen with their radar detector, where basically they release something that's junk and then try to sell it using lies and marketing in a way that's telling you that something is amazing. There's nothing wrong with marketing. Marketing is great, but just don't lie to people for the sake of making a buck. Don't scam people. Don't screw people over. And I've tested many different Rocky Mountain radar detectors over the years, and it's the same thing time and time again. Sometimes I feel like testing this stuff is honestly a waste of time, but I do think that it's important as kind of a public service announcement, so that for any of you guys who are not aware of this stuff and are seriously considering a Rocky Mountain radar product, buy literally almost anything else from any brand. Yeah. I've got recommendations on what's good detectors. I do tons of tests and reviews and comparisons, so links in the video descriptions if you want something that's actually good. If you're looking at a Rocky Mountain radar detector, I would definitely not recommend picking one of these up. But again, it's your money. It's your driver's license, your choice. You do what you want. Here's my test results. Here's what I found, and I'm happy to share with you guys to save you guys time and save you guys money, and I hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you in the next video.